Another day, another video answering questions, and as I mentioned, we're just going to start right off with the questions I got from the Prestige Gamers Forum. First up, RainbowWarrior, what game would you like to be seen as a movie or the other way around? Personally, I hope none of them. And a big reason for that is that none of them are able to translate one way or another. It's very hard to take a book or a video game, which has hours and hours of content, and turn that into a 2-hour movie or so. So a game like Uncharted or Assassin's Creed, those are the two most referred games to being turned into movies and shit like that. They have a lot of content. They have a lot of story. They have a lot of background to it that I just can't see coming out within 2 hours. Of course, they're going to have to cut parts. They're going to have to manipulate the story. They're going to have to change some things that we saw in the video game in order to apply it to a movie. So when you do something like that, you might as well just go play the video game. It's the same way with a book. It's the same way with any kind of novel where they try and take the novel and they turn that into a 2-hour movie and it just doesn't work. As far as going the other way around, turning a movie into a video game, how many times has that succeeded? I mean, there have been very few video games. There have been a couple exceptions. I think the Wolverine's Origins game was one of the better ones. There are very few exceptions where a movie could turn into a pretty decent video game. But other than that, almost every single movie that's had a video game tied to it has been a complete flop because it's so hard to take a 2-hour movie and turn that into a 10-hour game. Next question from Dirty Dan 490. Since his announcement, what is your opinion about Donald Trump running for president again? He's nothing more than an entertainment mouthpiece, that's all. All he's trying to do is cry for attention. That's all he's ever done. That's all he ever will do. Obviously, he was a successful businessman. I say was because essentially all he's doing right now is just living off of all the money he made in prior years. He made his money in real estate. He made some money in casinos and shit like that. Now he's actually losing money on that shit. But essentially, when he needs attention, he has to cry out for attention. He has to say, hey, look at me. So I'm going to say the most stupid shit possible and hope people give me attention. Essentially, what he's doing in the presidential race is screwing over all the other candidates who are running for the Republican nomination. By going after Mexicans and the immigration problems that we have in the United States, all he's doing is just pissing off minority voters, and his opponents are basically going to say, well, Trump is in the Republican Party. This is what the Republican Party stands for. Essentially, he's screwing over all the people that he's running against, in addition to screwing himself over. Personally, all he's ever good for is a nice figure to point and laugh and say, look at what that asshole's doing. Next question from FlyinReaper. What made you want to start making YouTube videos? I've said this a number of times in my question and answer session. However, I'll say it one more time. Back when Call of Duty 4 was in style, a couple of my friends were able to get recorders and shit like that. Whatever it was, a Dazzle or some shit. So they would post up videos of them having good games, and then you would always see me on the bottom of the fucking scoreboard with 2 yellow bars next to my name going 3 and 5, 5 and 7, and some stupid shit. I couldn't kill anything because back then the lag was so fucking horrible that people would just walk through bullets. What we would do was we would play domination, and I'll be the person that would always sit in the back making sure that the spawns didn't flip. So they would sit in the front, and they would get 30, 40 kills, whatever the hell it was. I was in the back basically picking up all the scraps and shit like that. So I would have shitty games. However, when I didn't play with friends and I played on my own, I would have decent games. But nobody would believe me because obviously when we played together, I played like shit. So eventually I said, you know what, I just gotta record this and show you all the stupid shit that I see in the games that we play together and how I play outside of parties. So by the time I got recorded, it was with Modern Warfare 2. I started posting up videos to Modern Warfare 2, and the rest of that is history. Next question from Scorpion MCL. Given the news lately about gay marriage, racism, and ISIS, do you think this will have an impact in gaming and how they make video games? I'll tell you right now, gay marriage, probably not. Although there was a gay character in Dragon Age, but I don't think the marriage portion of it is going to have a big impact on video games. Racism is only going to be touched on. It's almost never going to be dived into full head on when it comes to video games. The last game that did it and tried to touch on it was BioWare Infinite, and they caught flack for doing a timepiece and being accurate towards the timepiece. Oh, this game is racist. No, it's not. It was showing what fucking happened back in those days. That's some stupid shit. ISIS, though, could, but not directly. Obviously, when it comes to first-person shooters, a lot of what they want to do is show military conflicts, and with ISIS around and all the other terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and shit like that, you could turn portions of that into a video game based on like a Call of Duty or a Battlefield or some shit like that. So although I don't think ISIS would be used in particular, because why give a scumbag organization free publicity when all they want to do is murder and torture people, but essentially they could use portions of what they're doing in a video game to show the heroes kicking the shit out of them, busting their ass or whatever the fuck it is. So that is the only thing that I can see impacting video games, but it certainly won't be by name and it won't be directed only. Next question from Benjiman, and you know what? I always spell this motherfucker's name wrong. I always get the A and the I confused. It's like Benjiman. That's what I have to call this motherfucker. Anyway, his question is regards to women's right, past and present, can also incorporate future. Also, the feminism within the context of Tumblr and their feminazi user base, and also feminists who strive for equality around the world. Then he wants to ask a second one. He knows it's the second question. What is my take on feminism in the Western present world, and while it's a still worthwhile campaign in consideration all the achievements feminism has achieved over the past 50 years, blah, 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 blah. Now, here's the thing. One thing you guys are going to notice in common is that anything that was illegal at some point is still fighting for equality rights, whether it was slavery and racism and black people trying to fight for their own rights, whether it was gay marriage, the most recent one that fought for their rights within the United States, whether it's women who didn't have the right to vote for all these years, whether it's in other religions. Obviously women are treated like shit in some religions where they're supposed to be inferior, whatever the hell it is. Anything that the white man ruled illegal, anything that wasn't being a white male, means it was still part of the minority, means it was still seen as an inferior product. Now granted, there have been a lot of strides over the years in order for the equality to take place. However, that old school mentality, that old school line of thinking still exists in today's world. There's just no question about that. Racism still exists, sexism still exists, oppression of gay rights still exists. There's no question about that. There's no denying that. So obviously, when it comes to feminism, when it comes to movements, the whole point of that is to try and gain equality for just everyone, not just for the Western United States, but for obviously underdeveloped countries where they still see women as objects, for gay rights where other countries rule it illegal, or they outright kill you in some religions or some bases. So when it comes to movements like that, it's not about, oh, we want to be better than you. It's about we just want to be equal. We want to be seen as equals, and we want to be regarded as equals. And it's more than just having the rights of being equals. It's the mentality that people have to view them as equals. Now, when it comes to, the whole feminazi base and shit like that, women that go overboard and shit like that, obviously, there's going to be extremists. There's going to be people that feel like, oh, we should get better. We should have more. No, you should have the equal amount as anyone else. The problem is they do have what's considered equal, but they're still not viewed as equals by straight white men. That's just the reality of things. As much as people want to argue that, as much as people want to say, no, that's not true, it is true. And if you don't believe me, if you're a straight white man, would at any point you trade that in to be something else? If you were a straight white male, would you ever trade your life in to be a black guy? Probably not. Would you ever trade your life in to be a woman? Damn sure I wouldn't. Would you ever trade your life to be a gay person? No. You know why? Because society still doesn't see them as equals. That's why. Next question from the guy with no gamer tag. In the UK at least, through school, I believe he went to say we're, not were. Punctuation, motherfucker, that shit helps. We're mainly taught on how to pass the exams that eventually get us to university, which is annoying considering that we're going to have to more or less forget everything we've been taught because it's incorrect when you do a subject in more detail. Damn, man, you need fucking commas or some shit in that sentence. I would make it so that schools assess the skills which make you a good employee, not just on how you do exams, but if you could change anything, how would you change the style of education to improve? Well, you pretty much said it right there. One of the big issues when it comes to school is whether you're book smart. Book smart means you could read a story, you could read a book, you could listen to a lecture, you can take some information and reverberate it back in another form, on the form of a test, of an essay, of a book report, whatever the case may be. Just because you read the encyclopedia doesn't mean you understood it. Just because you read a book and you memorized what it says doesn't mean you understood it. There are a lot of people out there that are book smart, and sure, they can apply that to street smarts. They can apply that to applicable knowledge when it comes to the workforce. But there are a lot of people who are just street smart. They don't want to read a book. They don't have to read a book. They don't need to read a book because you know why? They know they're going to go out into a world, and knowing historical history from the fucking French Revolution is not going to help them build planes. It's not going to help them be a car mechanic. It's not going to help them become a police officer or a civil servant. There are a lot of things that we learn in school. Just because it was in a book doesn't make you a smart person. There's a difference between what you learn in a class and what you would apply to knowledge. Now, as far as how do you take that and apply it to some kind of test, I have no fucking idea. But essentially, the theory is correct. Who gives a fuck what you learn from a book? It's what you learn from life that should be more important. However, having to measure that one way or another when you're at university or whether you're at college or whatever the case may be is virtually impossible. How do you measure street smarts? You can measure book smarts. You can see how someone can remember some shit from a book, but how can you tell what they've learned from just being on the streets or just life lessons? That's a little bit more difficult. So that's why they have those grading tests. It's not that they don't agree with it, it's that there's just no other alternative. Next question from Haymaker. What is your take on the Confederate flag and memorabilia law? I'll start by saying this. I'll never understand Southerners being from the North. Never. They think differently than I do, and at times I wonder whether these people even use their brains at all. But listen to me. What fucking heritage are you celebrating with a flag that was a symbol of slavery and racism? The whole point of the South wanting to secede from the Union was to keep slavery. Every single state that wrote a declaration of war, wrote a declaration of secession, said exactly the same thing. They're leaving the North because it's about their right to keep slaves. It has nothing to do with culture and heritage. It has nothing to do with being independent. The South wanted to keep slaves. The North said that these people have rights, and that flag was going to be the flag if they had won the Civil War. A war for the right to deny other human beings rights. This bullshit that it celebrates heritage just means you're celebrating the right to own slaves. I'm not sure how Southerners are thinking that this is fucking normal. And the best part of all of this shit is, not one person who defends that flag can explain what their heritage is. Not a single one. Most of them will give some of the most ridiculous answers like, oh, it celebrates my ancestors. Really? Which ones? The relatives that you never met and fought in a war in order to keep slaves? That's what that flag represents? Or it celebrates Southern traditions. Oh, you mean like lynching, segregation, torture, and beatings that were handed out to all those slaves? That flag has and always will be a representation of slavery. The states that fought under the Confederate flag were fighting to leave the United States in order to keep their slaves. Their logic was that the North was trying to create new laws that they didn't like. They were legally getting enough votes to change the course of history, and they didn't like that. Which is funny, because 250 fucking years later, nothing has changed in the South. When Obama won his presidency, their immediate reaction was to impeach him. When the Supreme Court rules against them, their logic is to file a secession plan to leave the United States. Because that worked 250 fucking years ago now, didn't it? I will never fully understand people from the South because I don't think they use logic to think. I don't think they follow any sequence of parallel thinking, and usually just go with the first thought that pops in their head and think that's the best course of action. Now, as far as the memorabilia law, the Confederate flag is protected under the First Amendment. I may not agree with it, other people may not agree with it, but it is 100% free speech to display it. No state or city government could ban that flag from being displayed, and if places want to continue to sell that garbage, they certainly can, because that's a protected right. It's tasteless, it's classless, but they're allowed to do it. Then again, this is the South we're talking about, so class is like a step up in some cases. And I think this alone is what separates rational people from irrational people. I view the Confederate flag as a symbol of a horrible time in our country's history and agree with all the laws removing it from state flags or capitals. But as free speech, those ignorant rednecks can display it all they want. They have a protected right to remain an ignorant redneck. So that actually makes it much easier to spot out who's completely irrational and brain dead when you see them carrying that flag. Next question from the Raging Twinkie. New Call of Duty game with all three companies. Sledgehammer makes the campaign. Treyarch does the co-op portion, aka Zombies has no interface with multiplayer. Infinity Ward does multiplayer, but essentially all they do is copy and paste Modern Warfare 2, but with new perks, maps, guns, and ghost servers. Would you buy it? Well, two things in there would make me consider it, but the main thing is, what time frame are we talking about for the game? Obviously, if you're going to do a historical or modern game, yeah, that's definitely going to get my interest. But if you're going to do some futuristic shit with fucking exosuits and Titanfalls and wall running and seeing through wall, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. If you were to just do a normal modern warfare, we're talking current shit, yeah, that would be a game I would definitely be interested in. I mean, I didn't play Sledgehammer's campaign, so I really can't say anything about that. Treyarch, yes, they do know how to do zombies, although it is getting pretty fucking boring when you think about it. And Infinity Ward, they can use ghost servers, which, by the way, I love the ghost servers. I don't know about you guys, but that shit did work for me. It sounds like a game that would definitely get me to come back to the series. However, it all depends on when the time frame they place the game is in. Next question from CPA2520. I've been really curious as to what type of computer you use and editing software you use for all your videos. What are the specs of your computer and the video editing software that you use for videos? I'll tell you right now, I don't know what fucking specs are on my goddamn laptop. But I have one of these. What the fuck is it? It's a Sony 2-in-1 shit that I bought a couple years ago. It's a laptop and a tablet at the same fucking time. It's a touchscreen, whatever the hell it is. I can flip it into a laptop. You know, like the Surface Pro, whatever the hell it is. It was a much more powerful Surface Pro. You know, one of the things that when I was actually, you know, looking for my laptop years ago, a lot of these 2-in-1s, they were more tablet than laptop. You know, they didn't have USB ports. They didn't have things that you would normally use on a normal laptop or computer. So I wanted something that was a laptop that also had functions of a tablet. So when I came across this product, this was the pretty decent one. As far as what the specs are, I have no fucking idea. When it comes to my software, I use Sony Vegas. I think it's 12.0, whatever. I don't know. I stole that shit off the internet. I've be the first to admit it. I stole that shit. I used that fucking jailbreaker code or whatever the fuck it is. So I use Sony software. I don't really do much editing. You guys see it. I don't have any graphics or any shit like that. Basically, I chop up videos. I start it, I stop it, fast forward, whatever the hell it is, but that's the only thing that I use, Sony Vegas. Next question from Brown Power. What are your thoughts on the events that happened over the past month? The church shooting, Confederate flag scandal, gay marriage in all 50 states, Donald Trump's friendly speech on Hispanics, etc. Now, I joke about Brown all the time in game because the motherfucker has Google News up or something every time we play. He's always asking me random shit. Like, hey, Jay, did you hear the story of the 3 peg-legged midgets robbing a bank using masks of Ted Cruz and Martha Stewart? He will ask me random shit like that all the time. And of course, he wants me to discuss a whole bunch of topics in one fucking question. However, as you have seen, other people have asked these same exact questions, so I won't have to answer each and every one of his points because I've already detailed them in other questions. Now, as I mentioned earlier with Trump, he's an idiot looking for attention, and to generalize an entire country and population shows how ignorant and racist he really is. He's mainly doing it for attention and to win the prejudice votes from the idiots across the country. As for church shootings, it's sad. But at this point, is it surprising anymore? We know racism exists. We know there are mentally unstable people out there, and they have easy access to weapons and dangerous devices that can be used as weapons. So this was just one of many incidents that will continue to occur because people are scumbags. And oddly enough, it took a church shooting of all things for people to finally realize how fucking offensive the Confederate flag is to people. Now, I already addressed the Confederate flag earlier in Haymaker's question, so I'm not going to touch on that one. But as for gay marriage, I said this in one of my prior question and answer videos, but I predicted that it will go to the Supreme Court and the 14th Amendment will legalize it. Personally, I don't think it needed to be a federal issue. I think leaving it as a state issue was fine. But what ended up happening was these fucking states didn't follow the 14th Amendment, which was upheld in saying that states cannot deny rights to citizens or freedom. And marriage is not a religious right. It was always a government right. Coincidentally, since we're talking about the 14th Amendment, that was created after the Civil War in order to give slaves their rights. And guess who opposed that? Yep, the South, of course. Guess which states mainly opposed the gay marriage ruling? You got it right, the southern states. You see a pattern here? I said it all along, and I will say it again. Gay marriage does not affect you because you don't agree with it. If you don't agree with gay marriage, then don't have a gay marriage. It's that fucking simple. But don't bring your religious hypocritical bullshit about gay marriage into an argument if you've already been divorced, because that is just laughably, hysterically hypocritical of somebody to make that kind of argument. The fact is, the Supreme Court didn't rule gay marriage legal. What they said was banning it was illegal. Essentially, that does make it legal, but at no point did they say, listen, this should be legal. They said that under the 14th Amendment, you should not be banning people's rights, which gay marriage is supposed to be. But of course, Southerners won't get that. Like I said before, they don't think with logic. Final question from Prestige Gamers comes from Amazing Times 10. Where were you when 9/11 happened and how did you feel? You know, like many people in the world who were around during that time, you knew exactly where you were when 9/11 happened. I had just arrived to work that morning and a coworker came in maybe like a couple minutes after me. It happened to be her birthday that day, of all things, and she said that a plane had just hit the World Trade Center. Now, my initial reaction was probably that of many people. It must have been a small sightseeing plane or something like that. You know, pilot lost control or something like that. Maybe had a heart attack in flight. So initially, I didn't think it was a terrorist attack. But then she said it was a large jumbo airline. And even then, I still didn't think anything of it. I was like, you know what? I'll wait till the news confirms what actually hit the towers, and then I'll decide for myself what occurred. Not more than 5 minutes after she got into her office, she comes out saying that another plane hit the World Trade Center, and also the Pentagon got hit, and there was a crash out in Pennsylvania. And that's when I decided to let me open up the internet and see exactly what was going on. Because now, it sounds like a terrorist attack. With that many places being hit at the same exact time, sure enough, you see on the news, the towers are burning, the Pentagon's burning, and your initial reaction is pure shock. I know I sat there glued to my computer screen in disbelief that something like this was actually happening. You know, your mind starts racing to see if you think you know anyone that works there, you know anyone that lives in the area, something like that. And I happen to know a few people, including an ex-girlfriend at the time, who worked in that vicinity. I actually called up my ex-girlfriend at the time just to make sure she was okay. Then not too long later, as I continued to watch the news on the computer and stuff like that, I saw that one of the towers actually collapsed. And it really hit home at that point that when you see the tower falling down and no longer existing, that we truly were under attack. And after leaving work, it wasn't until I got home when I saw the actual footage. And like many people, you just feel numb after watching something like that. You know, you're watching something horrible and something disastrous, but you can't stop watching it because that's the only thing on your mind at the time. You know, like many events in history, you're never going to forget where you were when that happened. The same way people knew where they were when JFK got shot, when the Challenger exploded, when the Berlin Wall fell. That was a moment that people will always remember where they were at that time. So for me, I was at my very first job in Midtown Manhattan, nowhere near Lower Manhattan where the attack took place. And those moments of just feeling pure shock and numb, those are the first reactions to when you have it. You know, the anger, the sadness, the frustration, that all came later. But the initial reaction is just pure shock that something like this could actually be happening. So that does it for video number 3. All the questions that were asked over on the Prestige Gamers forum. So tomorrow we're going to continue over on the YouTube questions and finish all of those up. As always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.